Do you want some coffee or anything?
Coffee would be nice. Yeah.
Sound? Hiro Yamamoto, May 6th. How was my pronunciation?
Hey, that's pretty good. It's probably better than me. When you grow up in America, you speak American.
Yeah. So thanks for doing this.
All right.
I thought I'd start by asking you, tell me the story of how Soundgarden got started.
Ooh. It can be a long story or a short story.
Maybe just the story of how you guys got together, and maybe most importantly, the kind of music you wanted to make together.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I'd been playing in a band called The Altered, and it was kind of, this is more in the, the end of the beginning of the '80s. So it was more. We were more of a new wave band, and so. And then I was into stuff like we were Killing Joke and a lot of the British kind of Joy Division, Bauhaus, and but then like SST came out, so there was an Alternative Tentacles, so there was some of the stuff off of that we were really into listening to. Kim and I moved from Park Forest, Illinois together. We didn't actually go to the same high school at the same time, but we had gone, he is a year older than me, and we went to this, it was an alternative high school. It's kind of a school without doors kind of deal. This is basically playing Frisbee and reading books. And he had grown up, he was born here in Seattle, and I had come out here on a trip with my sister during, one spring break, and I was like, I want to leave. We were growing up in Illinois. We wanted to get out of there. So we decided, hey, let's just pack up the car and drive across the country. So off we went. And he had an aunt who lived here, so we ended up sleeping in her house, and we got an apartment. We slept on, and we actually had pallets and sleeping bags. And that's how we lived, in the basement of this apartment. But what we would do is we would sit around listening to music. We had KCMU, and we didn't have any money. We barely had jobs, and we would just sit around. That's what we'd run down to the store and get a case of beer, and we'd read the rebuses, and we'd sit around the little radio. We had a little transistor radio. We'd sit around that thing and listen to music, talk. That was kind of, so me and Kim were good friends that way.
Cool. What music were you guys into? What were you listening to?
The stuff like what I was talking about, Susie and the Banshees, even The Cure. I'm trying to know this, you're really Killing Joke, Gang of Four, you're testing my memory right now. Richard Hell and the Voidoids, so some punk stuff, Ramones, Sex Pistols, I don't know what else is there. New York Dolls. We're kind of a lot of punk, a lot of new wave and things like that.
And was this the music that sort of directly influenced, do you think, the music that you guys started to create together?
I would think so. Yeah, kind of. That was the kind of music I was into. I grew up in the suburbs in the '70s, so I grew
Sorry,
up.
Hiro.
Okay,
Sorry
that's
to interrupt you.
Hey, be quiet over there. I'm doing an interview.
Excuse me, guys.
Oh yeah, there's nothing in the top there.
Can I just ask you a huge favor? We're doing an interview in here. Could you just?
Yeah, we're leaving. Yeah, no, I know.
That's cool.
Good, let me.
No, that's cool. It's a good laugh. It's just we can hear it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
There you go.
Gotta be nice to
wasn't
people,
people.
Can't
Yeah, they weren't screaming at each other. Okay.
So yeah, was that the music that you think directly influenced what you guys were doing?
I think so. That's kind of what we were listening to, what we were into at that point. And I guess that was, we grew up in this era of Led Zeppelin and Cream and Hendrix and, and Rush and Yes and all the prog rock, they call prog rock now, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and I loved that when I was a kid. That's kind of what I grew up driving around the suburbs, driving around in a car and listening to music like that, and but that whole punk invasion was kind of well, push that away, we don't do that. We don't do long solos and that kind of, and so it was kind of weird because I still love that kind of music, but it was kind of it wasn't cool. So we listened to new wave and punk rock, and so yeah.
The interesting thing I think you said in your chat with Martin is that you sort of described the music as not really power chord rock per se. It was something different.
Oh yeah, right.
Can you sort of describe what you meant by that?
Well, we were more of a riff-oriented band when we first started playing. Like, so Kim went to college, and we started, we didn't really play together. I'd been playing in this altered band, but as he was getting ready to graduate, we always like talking about music, so we kind of were talking to him. I was trying to get him to play. He wanted to play more music, and that's about the time where, you want the real story? This guy, Matt Dentino, who we'd all grown up with in Park Forest, Illinois, he was kind of this guitarist who played like country western and cover band stuff, and he was a really good guitarist, but he always played covers and stuff, and he was trying to get this 50s rockabilly band together. And so, he'd get me and Kim and to play, and that's how we actually met Chris to try out for, I don't know if it was drumming or singing for the band, I can't even remember anymore, but and so that's how we met Chris. And like they did a party with Matt playing. They were the Shemps. They played like 50s rock and roll covers, Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly and stuff like that. And that's how I met Chris, and Chris needed a place to live, so I had a place, and that's where we practiced. And so he moved in with us, and so me and Chris just started jamming all the time. And that's about the time I started saying, "Hey, Kim, you should come over. We're playing all the time." We had a nice little loft. We could play till 2 a.m, and so Chris and I would just play drums and bass, all night long, kind of thing. And so it was a lot of riff-oriented stuff. That's how it kind of got started. Me and Chris would be, Kim would have some kind of riff that we'd kind of work on, and if you listen to the early Soundgarden, it's parts. I mean, it's like it isn't really power chord rock. It's a lot of this riff glued to another riff kind of thing, and that's kind of the way we wrote early music.
To what extent was what you were doing metal? Do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it was dark. I guess the thing about, when I listen to myself play bass, even back then, I have kind of a dark way of playing. There's so I think in that sense it was kind of quirkier music. It was definitely more new wave, and but there was kind of a darkness to it, and there was kind of an edge to it. I don't know if you would call it like heavy metal, but there was kind of a edgier thing to it. The solos, like Kim when he took solos, would kind of get going, and he didn't want to play like other people, right? So he would kind of start his solos the way he wanted to, but he didn't really, they were real solos. He didn't know where he was going with them. Yeah. And so when he came to an end, he would kind of go free jazz, punk rock, and just kind of hit the strings and kind of freak out. And so that was a difference, right? That was something that was different, that people were, like guitar solos were usually they were solos, but they were pretty thought out to begin with. And they were about virtuosity, and Kim wasn't really about that. Like that's kind of wasn't his approach at that point.
Yeah, it sounds like the early stuff was sort of more towards the punk end of the
chaos,
spectrum than the metal end of the spectrum.
Yeah, right. We were more chaotic. That's kind of where we were. We were more new wave, punk, and chaotic. Kind of. That's what we were trying to do. Yeah.
Cool. Can you tell me how was the term grunge applied to what you guys were doing? Do you remember that?
I think it was, see, look at this. I wore them today, okay? And then pants with holes in them, T-shirts. Actually, I wore, this T-shirt's not all ripped up. But, the kind of thing was, part of it was we didn't really have any money. Yeah. And so, we didn't shop at Goodwill because we thought it was cool. If you had to get some clothes, you had to go to Goodwill. And so you wore pants like this because they were the only pants you had. And so that was kind of the thing, was like, we looked kind of, I guess people said it looked kind of grungy, but really that's all we could afford. So we wore the clothes we had and wore them till they didn't fit anymore. But I'd always liked, even when I was a kid, my mom was always taking my clothes out of the garbage, up to the garbage, and I'd be pulling them back. No, that's my favorite jacket, So I guess maybe that was kind of our, it's an ingrained thing from when I was younger. But, part of it was just we weren't very well, long hair, didn't shave very often. Still don't shave very often. So I guess that's kind of grungy when you think about that.
Do you remember when the term was used to describe your music?
As grunge? Oh, that's a good one. I'm not, I think it might have been that guy in, is it the there's a magazine in Detroit called Motor Booty. And I think he might have been the first one to use the term grunge. All I know is that after that article came out about our first single, everybody copied it. And I can't even remember the guy's name. Do you remember his name? The guy who did Motor Booty? And anyway, but he wrote this article about us in Seattle, and ever since then, every article I ever saw after that, including we were in Spin or Rolling Stone or one of those, I mean, it was basically the same copy, just rewritten. So you kind of like, oh, that's how you write. Well, you're a journalist. I'm sorry, but you hear somebody say something, and then okay, well, hey, I'll use that same thing. So I think he actually might have been CMJ that used the term grunge. I think that those are the two. My memory isn't the greatest, but it's either CMJ or the guy who did Motor Booty.
Do you remember how you felt about that word being used to describe your music? Did you care? Or did it seem right? Or?
Yeah, I don't think it really mattered. I mean, we played music that we wanted to play. It didn't matter what people called it, I mean, that's kind of... I mean, this is at a time in Seattle where things were growing, but, I mean, it wasn't like... I mean, we played music because that's how we spent our time. It wasn't like we wanted to be grunge on the world, or you know what I mean, and we just wanted to play music because that's what was fun. That was kind of how we enjoyed life. So going out to see bands, playing in a band, and all our friends were in bands, so that's kind of what we did. So it wasn't about like, hey, we want to be seen as this or be this or that. We just played music. That's kind of what it sounded like, I guess. So.
When you moved to Seattle, what was it like? How would you describe the city at that time?
Well, Seattle was kind of a cowboy town. I mean, we came from Park Forest, Illinois, so it's a suburb of Chicago. So Chicago's a big city. It's real urban. It's got steel mills, and it's working class. But it's also a financial center. So it's kind of got all of everything. But it's a Midwestern town, So coming out here, I remember getting out and. I mean, there were still people wearing, there probably still are now, there were people wearing cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and chewing tobacco. It's a Western town. And, I mean, it's still, you look around here, it's still kind of a Western town. So it was definitely different. And, but our impression was we came down and we'd come down here downtown where like all the bums hang out by the bus stop, and we didn't have cars, so we took the bus everywhere. So we were kind of living the low life, ourselves. But it was a smaller town. Microsoft wasn't anything yet. That was one thing. So there wasn't money here. It was Boeing. It was Boeing and wood, I mean, basically Weyerhaeuser and Boeing were the only things here that were big. So it wasn't this highfalutin fancy coffee place, I mean, it was just a kind of a lumber town in a way.
Cool. You mentioned in the chat with Martin too that you brought up that your music had angst to it, and you also talked a bit about how these were the Reagan years and that kind of thing. Can you tell us about how that feeling of your music, given the state of, I guess, America at that time?
Yeah, well, I mean, this whole thing happened during Reaganomics, right? And some people look back at Reaganomics and say, well, he won the Cold War and stuff like that. But I mean, I just remember I had first moved to Olympia with my friend Stuart, who is a recording engineer, and we had gone there, and I was working at this job under this program that was called CETA. It was like Cooperative Education and Training Association or something like that. But they paid half my wages. And so Reagan got elected, and before he even took office, it was after the election, they basically started saying, this program's not going to be anymore. The funding's getting cut. And so they basically told my employers, we can't pay half of his salary anymore. And before he even took office, I was out of a job. so that was kind of Reaganomics. And that I moved from Olympia and all of a sudden didn't have a job. I moved back home, and that's when me and Kim decided to move out to Seattle. We figured, well, if we moved to Seattle, it'd be easier to find a job. But, we worked, we lived through the trickle-down theory. We didn't have much. I mean, we'd buy a bus pass. What did we have? We had buy a bus pass. We ate top ramen and chicken livers, beef heart. We get a bag of potatoes and rice, and We lived, and finding a job wasn't that easy. I worked in a bike shop for about 5 or 6 years fixing bicycles. So.
Do you think your music was a response to that?
Well, we played music because that was the cheapest form of entertainment, and I guess so. I mean, like in a way, that was kind of that. I mean, a little bit of the anger from that, and just the feeling of like you have this society of of have, and there's definitely the have not, and when you're young, especially. I mean, a lot older now, so it's a little different, but. I just remember the feeling of where do we fit in this world, right? I mean, there's a lot of that. When you're young, you're always kind of trying to push to find like, where am I here? Where do I fit in? What is there for me? And that music was a lot of that, right? So I guess that feeling and that whole idea, like we were kind of a culture of our own. Like we were a little, we were a subculture. We had all these people that played music, were in bands. There were these clubs we'd go to. So there was a great kind of knit society here of people who were doing their own thing and didn't fit in with I'm going to work every day and coming home. Like music was what we lived for. So that was kind of that was what was more important, is defining this is who we are. We were not like, my dad was an engineer. He went to work on the train in Chicago every day. He caught the 704 or whatever, you know what I mean? So like that's the kind of work. It's kind of like get up every morning, do the alarm clock hum, and take the 1815 into the city. That was kind of, that's kind of what we were rebelling against, I guess. Yeah. So.
Tell me about this tape, Bands That Will Make Money.
Okay.
And what that tape was, and what impact do you think it had?
Right. Well, so now, and I'm trying to think of what.
Faith Henschel,
Faith Henschel did that, and I'm trying to think of what songs we had on it and on some of the other bands, but we were on it. Just Skin Yard. Who else was on that? Feast, maybe. I really don't. Do you know? You might
I can't
know.
Remember
you know.
All the
You
bands,
might know
but
better.
Skin Yard for sure.
Yeah. And and we had played a show with Faith No More. We had opened up for Faith No More. They were on tour. And that's kind of how we were starting to get our name. We opened up for like Soul Asylum and Faith No More. So some of these kind of independent, bigger touring bands, and we were getting great opening slots for them. And we played with them, and they really liked us. We really liked them. Well, they went down to They were on Geffen at the time, and they went down and they were hanging out with their A&R dude or girl, woman, and they saw the tape, and they go, "Oh, Soundgarden, you gotta check this out." And so she listened to it, and she called us up. And once she started talking to us, everybody started talking to us. That's when all these different labels started calling and saying we're interested. So it was kind of like that magazine article I'm talking about. One person goes, "Hey," and then everybody else jumps in and goes, "Oh, hey," And but that's kind of what got the ball rolling for us, And that was when, in a lot of ways, that's when things really changed around here. Because that's from, us being, a little band playing little clubs the size of this to, all of a sudden people are whining and dining you, or actually people are taking you out to dinner in places like this. Things that we'd never done before. Like, "Oh, right, we can order whatever we want." "All right," And that's kind of the beginning of that. Yeah.
And just the last question about Sub Pop. Given the fact, as you talked about, that the whole LA pop metal thing was really huge in the 80s. It was kind of like the dominant musical form, in terms of like rock and rock radio in America. With Sub Pop, do you think Jonathan and Bruce were interested in sort of positioning Soundgarden, Mudhoney, Green River, these bands, as being something quite different than all of that, or do you think they were interested in positioning you guys as metal bands as well? Where do you think they sat?
I think they thought we were different than that. I thought that. I know that the whole Sub Pop thing under Bruce was, independent music. That's kind of it. It wasn't L.A. Everything that wasn't L.A. was what it was really about. So I think, to me, that's kind of, they thought like this is what happens underneath what people are trying to sell you, right? I mean, this is like, you know, there's the stuff you buy because they're trying to sell you Crest to brush your teeth, but then there's something below that, like where somebody's always out making their own toothpaste. So it's kind of same kind of deal, right? I mean, it's like, you know, you got the big guys, and then underneath there's always the people who want something different. So, and that's kind of what Sub Pop really represented. It was like, you know, you got a choice here. You don't have to buy what they're selling you, right?
One other thing we didn't talk about, and I promise this is one of my last questions. KCMU, how important was KCMU in supporting the scene that was coming up at that time?
Well, I think it was really helpful. I mean, for one, I was like, that time of, well, there were so many independent bands, and, you know, Sonic Youth. I mean, they were big. I mean, like this whole underground current throughout the whole nation was underground bands, and KCMU was really pivotal in playing things like that. And you know, they were a different radio station. They were an alternative radio station, right? They were something that you know, you could listen to something you wouldn't hear, and they played us. They played all the local bands, but they also, you know, brought shows to Seattle, and so they were really pivotal. I mean, like the whole thing with Faith Henschel and Jonathan was on KCMU. Kim had a radio show on KCMU. So there was a lot of people who knew each other, and so that kind of helped keep the scene together too. People playing records and sharing, like, hey, I'm really into this kind of stuff, right? So that really helped kind of make this whole you know, area like into music, into this kind of music. So I think that was helpful.
Imagine how different things would be if there was no college radio.
Yeah, well, yeah, no kidding.
Like if you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, just as you're talking, I'm thinking about like so many musical scenes got their start through
college radio.
Radio.
Well, that's just like I'm saying, is like, you know, what Sub Pop represents is not you going to the store and buying, you know, Palmolive or whatever, right? I mean, it's just like, it's the options that you get that you don't have to buy that stuff. I mean, that's kind of the whole world is, hopefully the whole world is that way. I mean, because, and that's, I think, when we look at our world today, it's getting so much more corporate and bigger. I mean, that's kind of where we were back then. Is like we were looking at corporate world versus us, you know, and it's harder and harder to fight that fight because the corporate world keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you still want to say, I don't want your stuff, I want my stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of like, that's the big fight. If it's, you know, what you eat, if it's what you wear, if, you know, I mean, that's basically. The whole thing falls down to like people wanting to make their own choices, you know. So,
and just to make sure that we have it clearly from you, what was that first indication that Soundgarden, when you were with the band, was going, that had taken a significant step forward, and the first indication that to you that okay, Soundgarden could become something quite huge?
I guess it's that kind of time when all the major labels were calling us, taking us out to dinner. I mean, like, there was a time there where we spent about a half a year to a year. Everything was, we went down to Los Angeles on a tour basically to go see all the record labels and have them see us, and so there was this, you know, and it was all like we'd play a show and all these guys would be coming from Los Angeles to see us, and that's where it went from, you know, who's on the guest list, all our friends, to like, who's on the guest list? Well, them from A&M, this is from, you know, this guy's from CBS, this guy's from Geffen, blah blah blah, you know, like the guest list was this huge thing of corporate people. And so that's when we kind of knew, like, whoa, this is kind of getting bigger than what we thought, you know, like, and so that's definitely the turning point. Right? Yeah.
Last question, what was it like to see Soundgarden at the Showbox not too long ago?
Well, at first it was a little rough because, I mean, I gotta say, it's like, you know, when you're not in the band and they got huge, you know, you're kind of, I'm the fifth Beatle, right? I'm the one who was not there for all the big stuff, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was good to see those guys playing together. I mean, I gotta say, I felt like, oh man, I wish I was playing too. I mean, there's, and especially when they're playing like the stuff that I played on, it's hard not to like, oh, that could be man, I'd like to be doing that. But it was fun to see them. I mean, it really was. It was kind of exciting. It's good to see. And that the other thing, like, the scene, all the people that we know from the bands that we played together, there were a lot of people there that I haven't seen in 15 years and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. It was good to see people like that.
And why do you think Soundgarden is back? I mean, why do you think that they're relevant?
I don't know. I really don't get it. Are they relevant? I don't know. I guess they must be. It's been a long time. It's hard, that's the other thing is like to think like, wow, that was a generation ago. So I guess that, this is part of that thing. There are kids now who probably their parents listen to Soundgarden. So there's that curiosity, like things like, like when we were, like, I mean, I grew up kind of listening to music from the 70s, but even in the 80s, I mean, you're kind of revisiting like what was going on in the 60s, and what, I mean, why is that music, like you kind of revisit things. So there is a relevance to that change. And maybe the thing about grunge is it was a type of music that was marketable, but was a type of music that had soul to it, and it's because it was made by people who lived it, and so maybe that's why it's relevant, right? So
Great.
Okay.
That's a great answer.
Okay.
Thanks, Hiro.
Thanks,
that was
Sam.
cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome.